just take a step back and realize something? A driver is about to be banned, but it's not the driver you expect or would have preferred. And I may not be a fan of theirs, but even I think it's excessive. Maybe I should get an F1 driver's opinion about it. Charles, do you want to comment on this? Okay, calm down. Jeez. Esteban Ocon has seriously gotten himself into hot water now after going too far, potentially jeopardizing a situation where Alpine were due another point. Yes, it's quite sad talking about a team where last year they were bagging a couple of podiums to now this year they are lucky to score a singular point. But when you get the situation where they are scrapping that far to just try and get said point, there's something going on here, and it's not just Esteban. I feel like there are other factors going on here, and maybe Esteban's not entirely to blame. In any case, the team principal for Alpine has had enough and was clearly incensed when he was kicking off on French TV, saying that Esteban did something that he did not want to see, and that there would be, as you are probably familiar at this point, consequences. What these full-life consequences are, I have absolutely no idea. They could be anything, but the media seems to have run with the idea about him being benched for the Canadian Grand Prix or something. No, that's too harsh, but let's provide some context as to why Ocon did what he did. And this is something that was brought to light that I did not know about, but now I do, thanks to Emmanuel Tozor and Manor on Twitter, where they both illustrate that the clash before the tunnel was coming. And by the way, shout out to Casual F1 Fan on Twitter for inspiring the idea for this video, and to try and be a little bit more fair toward Esteban. Give all three of them a round of applause. As you can see from Stroll's camera, the two Alpines are busy scrapping with each other, and Alonso is the buffer in front of Gasly. Ocon seems to get a good toe up the hill and attempts to go around both of them, but Gasly steadily moves to the right, almost sending Esteban into the wall at the top of said hill, before darting over to the left to get Fernando before they get to the casino. Ocon tries to recompose himself, but then suddenly Lance Stroll is on his inside, so he has to then fight off Lance and do his best to keep in front of him before they can do a right turn. And then of course we see the incident at the tunnel where Ocon slips into the corner on the inside, almost gets the position, but Gasly realizes this, he then goes wide, he's about to clip the barrier, the two tangle, and Ocon gets sent into the air, and Pierre is lucky to escape major damage himself. As Emmanuel pointed out in their tweet, maybe Bruno Famin should take a look at that incident as well to understand why Ocon was so incensed, because Gasly almost put him in the wall. But seriously, Famin should really take a look at that footage before passing judgment like that on live TV. Because if you think about it, if Pierre had been successful at pushing Ocon into the wall, that probably would have torn the right side of Esteban's car apart going into that corner. After the incident behind him, there would have been even more debris. Anybody trying to sweep up stuff from that hill, they would deserve a raise, quite frankly. And then we get to a point where Lance Stroll gives Pierre a little love tap whilst Esteban is positively ravishing the Frenchman. Okay, I was quick to judge that it was all Esteban's fault, that this is just yet another example of him being a complete and utter hothead. But if you just roll things back to that footage provided by Manor and Emmanuel, you might understand that Ocon was really close to getting into the barriers, being sent off for an early shower, or maybe, if it had been even faster, being catapulted off of the track into the nearest branch of Hermes. But since there was no damage and the drivers were both able to continue for about 30 more seconds, and I guess even if there had been contact, the stewards would have just raised their hands up and gone, "Oh no, lap 1 incident!" Like they washed their hands of the matter of the Perez-Magnussen thing, even though the Ocon-Gasly thing later on, that got a penalty. Sainz and Piastri got noted. Why wasn't that one noted? Had it not been for that guardrail, several photographers could have been severely injured or killed. Nah, mate, apparently that's not worth a penalty at all, because Kevin Magnussen's right up next to a race ban, and if he did get the race ban, that would not look good, because this is meant to be the creme de la creme of drivers. Oh dear. Yeah, that was completely and utterly ridiculous. In any case, it is what it is, and Esteban Ocon has not only got a 5-place grid penalty for the next race to deal with, but the future of his time with Alpine is on the line, since those in the know seem to believe that Alpine are going to bench him for the Canadian Grand Prix, that being, according to Sky Sports' Craig Flater, under serious consideration. Yes, of course, this is coming from Sky Sports, so we do need to temper our expectations. We need to hear this from other journalists, but the fact that this is even being talked about means that the media has basically had enough of Esteban Ocon and are quick to condemn him. And also, really? A team benching their own driver like that? I can't remember a time a team's done that in recent memory. The closest I can even think of is Super Aguri with Yuji Ide after he flipped over Christian Albers at Imola, and he was out for the next race. But at the same time, the FIA basically yanked his super license away, so the governing body did that as well as the team. But I can't think of a good enough example. And if you can, do write it down in the comments, and the one that I think is the most relevant to Esteban's situation, I'll definitely pin it. I really don't think this is the best course of action, because getting rid of a driver that has been part of that team for so long, it's laughably excessive. What would this solve? Pierre is extremely lucky that Bruno Famin obviously had not been paying attention to that first tangle up in the first sector, because otherwise his language would have been either less incensed or directed at both drivers. And surely you wouldn't bench both of your drivers, right? Well, I mean, with Bruno Famin, I have absolutely no idea at this point. I barely know anything about the guy, except that he worked for Peugeot. And the thing about this is that I've got the impression that Bruno Famin, he can basically do what he wants. He's effectively been given carte blanche by the Renault group to run the team as he sees fit. Yeah, you see what I did there? I said carte blanche. It's a French phrase, and it's a French team, and it's a French team boss. Oh, I'm so witty. And that he doesn't see the need to replace himself as a team principal, since he was meant to be a temporary stopgap in the wake of Otmar Safnauer's dismissal, to which Alpine's top bods had no plan to do so, that it was a knee-jerk reaction. And now Renault's board has basically implied that Bruno's got the job for as long as he wants it. It means that either they didn't bother looking, because apparently they started looking after the Belgian Grand Prix, or nobody wanted the job, and that Bruno's the only guy, that they've got. Effectively, what we've got here is a team principal who's practically untouchable, because if they get rid of Bruno now, they will have nobody suitable, because quite clearly, no one wants that job. Although maybe there might be rumblings that Crack might get replaced, so maybe he might go there. And I'm really not impressed with the tenure of Bruno Famin. I've not really seen in any interview where he's taken personal responsibility for all the stuff that's been going on with the team. There's just been sacking after sacking after sacking, or people leaving. Yes, of course, they are trying to improve their technical structure, but what they're doing is basically copying McLaren and now starting to pilfer McLaren's staff. It's not exactly innovative. And by the way, the Renault engine is basically the slowest on the grid right now, so they've now got to try and make up for it even more so than any other team in the aero department, in the engineering department, the mechanical side. It's an uphill struggle for them. But anyway, let's get back to Esteban for a second. One thing is for sure, and it's not Famin's fault per se, Esteban should not have been paired with a driver whom he has personal beef with from the past. That's Otmar's fault. Even though Alpine has done their best to try and limit the potential flashpoints from Esteban and Pierre, the fact remains that it could easily have happened, and now, under Bruno's watch, it has definitely happened. Otmar did his best to keep it cool, and for the most part, it worked. There were a couple of incidents where you could easily think, oh, it started! Well, they were quick to defuse that. Bruno? No. He did not do what Otmar did and try and put out the fire immediately. Now, he's just stoked the fire with even more fuel from himself. How is that sensible? And then it doesn't help that Swiss media is basically adding even more fuel to the fire, saying that now Gasly and Ocon are fighting for a potential Audi seat, and that Esteban is now looking at Haas, and you just get the feeling that maybe because Ocon is vocally saying that, oh, there are many other teams that might want me, I'm still connected to Mercedes, don't you know, like I've mentioned in a previous video, Alpine are probably just fed up. Bruno's probably fed up. He has said many times that he wants team players. Gasly has been doing a really good job at that, and then I'll get into a little bit later, Bruno's been flirting with other drivers in the Alpine fold, and yeah, the mood in Alpine is not good at all, and now the drivers are suffering. But that Audi gig though, that cannot be ignored, because Nico Hülkenberg's got a multi-year deal, one of those jobbies where the endpoint is completely nebulous. That is a really big deal. Audi are coming with a lot of cash, and 2-3 years in Formula 1 guaranteed. Both drivers will be chomping at the bit for it, which would understandably mean that Gasly and Ocon are now going to fight this year. But it just so happens that the media are paying more attention to the Ocon bit rather than the Gasly bit. Again, thank you so much, Emmanuel and Manor, for pointing that out to me. So, yeah, I just feel like Esteban's completely done with that team, and that, if this does happen, that he does get benched, it's game over. However, I reckon that Esteban's got a really uphill battle to try and fix his reputation amongst the F1 community, which I admit I was part of the problem, and I will try and do better from now on and be a little bit more fair toward Esteban, because I think it's gone far enough. We really need to take stock at the situation here, that Esteban really needed a little bit more help when it came to public relations, and also the team principals trying to keep a lid on any potential scuffles. So I'm looking at you, Toto Wolff, the supposed manager of Esteban. You should have really been schooling him more on how to handle himself. You surely would have known that he does have a bit of a temper, so you might need to find people that can help regulate him in a way. Because of this, Ocon's had to deal with a lot of controversy throughout his F1 career, and it's becoming obvious that Esteban's post-race interviews in the media pen are not good, since in the pen after Monaco's exit, he was non-committal and pushing 120%, something to be expected when fighting for a singular point, before then doing a 180 on social media after probably having had time to reflect on the footage, which he hadn't seen before, like he mentioned in the media pen. And it all stemmed from back in his Force India days. Seriously, Toto was not on the ball. First off, you get Perez and he not getting along and fighting each other after Checo had had a relatively smooth time with Nico prior to 2017. Don't get me started about the 2018 Brazilian Grand Prix, the first season of Drive to Survive, mind you, and then he goes and collides with Max Verstappen when he's being lapped. I mean, admittedly, it was a bit foolish for him to do that, but that definitely solidified his reputation as being a bit of a hothead. And then, what probably should not have been seen is the confrontation between he and Max, and Esteban looks like he's not really taking it seriously. Max is getting angry, Max does get punished for it, and yeah, it was not good. And then, of course, he sat out a year. He did get back to Renault eventually, but that year, without Esteban there, allowed the media to stew over it. That incident, the year before, Checo being angry, yeah, Toto really should have been going on damage control, trying to help Esteban sort things out in terms of that sense of being an F1 driver. And then, of course, also trying to smooth things over in general. And then I saw Sky Sports put out a compilation video showing off 6 examples as to why Esteban Ocon tangles with teammates. So again, adding more fuel to the fire, Esteban is a complete and utterly terrible teammate. So let's go look at a couple of those incidents. So Spa 2017, right? I looked at that footage from that compilation video. I know I should probably not have been contributing to that click. Checo was accountable since he did turn on Ocon too early and ended each other's push for P10. Sound familiar? Baku's incident though? Yeah, okay, that was Ocon's fault, but Singapore 2018? Not as much. Yes, Ocon tends to go for gaps which threaten his teammate, but Checo tapped him into the wall there. Then there's context to consider. When you look back to 2018, that team was in the middle of being transformed into Racing Point, which would then become Aston Martin. Papa Stroll was coming in, adding more money, and adding his son as a driver. Both of these drivers were in danger of losing their place in Formula 1. Sergio Perez had a little bit of a safety net because he did bring in a lot of Mexican sponsorship money, whereas Esteban didn't so much. So the only way that Ocon would have survived is if he really outperformed the nuts out of that car. The relationship between both of them probably wasn't all that good, and then ultimately we saw the clashes that they had last year, then Singapore, and then of course Brazilian Grand Prix. That was probably the final nail in the coffin when it came to Papa Stroll. So thusly, because of all of that, Ocon gained the reputation of being a terrible teammate. And then when he partnered up with Fernando Alonso, who's already an incendiary person in of himself, that didn't help matters. They were trying to fight each other. Yeah, I think the teammate who is partnered with Esteban should also take some responsibility as well. And a thing I would really like to point out is the year when Daniel Ricciardo was Esteban's teammate. I don't recall any incidents where they came to blows or they got angry with one another. In fact, it was Daniel that caused the only major scrap that they had in Turkey at the start, where his too good start punted Ocon off the track. And it was also a very humbling year for Esteban in his first year back, because Daniel completely wiped the floor with him in terms of, who was the better driver. But that second place right at the end of the season, that did ease the pain somewhat and showed that Ocon did have potential. But Daniel was being a relatively good teammate in admitting his mistake, putting his hands up, apologising to everybody, including Esteban probably, and therefore smooth things over. So, in a way, you need to step back and think, okay, Ocon is a bit of a hothead. So the teammate should really take that into consideration and try and smooth things over, as well as the team principal. Everyone else should really anticipate who are they signing up. Do you see where I'm going with this? Yes, Ocon is a hustler. He does have talent and he can be very fast. But there is something about his relationship with certain teammates and those from other teams he gets into scraps with that rubs people up the wrong way. Because if you put him with a driver who is busy hustling himself, it's going to cause fireworks. And all of the big crashes that he's had came with drivers who were on the up. 2018, Max Verstappen was steadily getting himself into the position where he is today. And then, of course, Max Verstappen, being a completely honest guy and very, very vocal when he is angry, was incredibly angry with Esteban. They have previous history in various other categories. And then, of course, we got that footage, which, again, we were not probably supposed to see, of them duking it out in the weighbridge. And yes, I bet Ocon is regretting having that come out and his expression looking completely remorseless. Yeah, that was not a good move, Esteban. But having looked back at this and really thought about it and how he got into this position, I don't think Ocon could be blamed entirely. It's the people who would have schooled him in how to be a Formula One driver not doing enough to fully understand what Esteban is all about. Esteban had to work hard to get into Formula One with very little sponsorship money, and he showed that he could have skill. He was right up there with everybody, some of the biggest drivers in the sport. But Toto was there to help him get in, sure, with Force India, but at the same time, he didn't properly teach him on how to handle a teammate of Checo's capability and stature amongst Formula One, and he's already a bit of a hothead in himself in trying to prove things, and he's also got a really good reputation in the team. Team harmony, that wasn't really shown. So Toto, I think the buck stops at you and various team principals who didn't really know how to keep a lid on him. Which is why I reckon that benching Ocon is completely the wrong thing to do. All this is going to do is cement the Frenchman's reputation as a bad teammate forever. Putting him in a timeout is not going to solve anything. They should really just sit down, sort out their mistakes, learn from it, and move on. Even the Haas drivers of Grosjean and Magnussen with Steiner as the team principal could do that. But okay, I can fully understand that, yeah, this incident might lead to Ocon not having his contract renewed at Alpine next year, and that maybe someone could replace him. But not this year. Next year, perfectly fine, it happens all the time. But to be benched for a race, or maybe the rest of the season? No, absolutely not. No. Because if that does happen, that's going to leave an indelible mark on Ocon's career for the rest of his life. No other Formula One team will have him. Other motorsporting categories will take a look at Ocon and go like, ooh, is he a team player though? They all make quick judgments. Haas, a team that Ocon has been talking to, will they really want him to partner Ollie Behrman in his first full year in Formula One? Probably not. Komatsu is completely smitten with Oliver. Audi is trying to figure themselves out and rebuild. Do they really want Ocon partnered up with the guy who he kicked out of Formula One back in 2019? That's going to make things awkward. Although at the same time, I think Nico will do his best to try and mitigate that situation because, well, he's over the whole situation with Magnussen in 2017. I think he's mature enough to not let that get the better of him. But Esteban, though, we don't know because of the reputation the media has given him. No, don't bench him. This level of doubt could easily send teams looking elsewhere because remember, the silly season may not be as silly as it was a few months ago, but there are still plenty of open positions down on the lower half of the grid. There could be easily other people that Alpine might want. There's Jack Doohan, who apparently was talking to Bruno Famin after the race and having a little bit of a discussion there. There's of course Mick Schumacher. Both drivers are drivers that Famin has really been waxing lyrical over the past couple of days. And I would love Mick to get back into Formula One. Yes, I would love for Mick to partner up with Gasly. Next year, perhaps. Not right now. Not like this. But I do think that maybe Jack Doohan might be a possible shout-out because before Bruno Famin took up the team principal role, he was put in charge of the Alpine Academy. So he would have gotten to know Jack and what he was capable of. And also, I think Bruno would want to do one over Otmar, who was in charge at the time of them losing Oscar Piastri to McLaren. He would want to say that Otmar was terrible. I kept our Alpine Academy star in Jack. There you go, here's your seat. Even though it's not nearly as good as it was a couple of years ago. Yeah, I know. Yeah, okay, let's make one thing clear. Otmar was not personally responsible for Oscar slipping through. He was just there when it finally happened and everything hit the fan. You know, I think it's becoming similar to what is going on at Haas, how Kevin Magnussen, I don't think Komatsu sees him as part of their future anymore, a remnant of the Steiner era. Maybe Famin's doing the same thing with Ocon because he's been around for a few years. Maybe there's a need for change. Oh, actually, okay. Doubt time. Maybe he was looking for an excuse to get rid of Esteban, and then this incident, which got fueled by the media, Sky Sports then adding even more fuel to that blazing inferno, and then getting everybody talking like I am in this video, and many other people on YouTube who are being less fair than I, and actually looking at other people's research, and then crediting them and giving them kudos. Yeah, maybe this was the excuse and the mistake that Bruno was looking for to bench him, get rid of him, and get somebody else in the Alpine fold who is more loyal. Yeah, loyalty is important, but you've also got to think about skill. Esteban does have the skill. He just needs to be coached in just taking it down a notch. That's all he needs. But one thing's pretty much certain. Pierre will be happy about this. Speaking of excuses, Aston Martin may be running low on those as their quest to topple their engine suppliers comes to a screeching halt, and another unlikely team is about to jump them. You can watch in this video next why I think Aston Martin should be really paying close attention to racing balls and how Yuki Tsunoda's consistency might be a potential danger at the end of the year. It's closer than you think.